Excellencies and dear participants, Namaste and good afternoon. Welcome to our very special session, the second session of Diplomats Conclave of NIICE International Conference on Understanding Nepal's Foreign Policy. This is the last session of 27 sessions that we hosted so far with 140 scholars, diplomats, experts, and senior journalists at this two-day conference. We had the first session of Diplomats Conclave this afternoon, where we hosted His Excellency Krishna Prasad Dhakal, Nepal's ambassador to UAE, Mr. Mark Templer, Deputy Chief of Political Economic Section, US Embassy Kathmandu, Ambassador Dr. Nath Bhardwaj, former Nepalese ambassador to Qatar, His Excellency Durga Prasad Bhandari, Nepalese ambassador to the State of Kuwait. We are concluding this session. We are conducting this session through two sessions to accommodate excellencies based in Kathmandu and Nepalese ambassador based at several missions abroad who are located at different time zones. The aim of this session is to explore Nepal's engagement with its friendly countries and how our friendly countries engage with Nepal. At this second session of Diplomats Conclave, we have His Excellency Mr. Hanan Goder-Goldberger, Ambassador of Israel to Nepal, Sepideh Keyvanshad, Mission Director, US Agency for International Development, Nepal, Edward Roberts, Deputy Ambassador of British Embassy, His Excellency Bhrigu Dhungana, Nepalese Ambassador to Canada. Excellencies, we are really honored by your kind presence. We'd like to request all our excellencies to make their remarks in 20 minutes. Let me first invite His Excellency Hanan Goder-Goldberger, Israeli Ambassador to Nepal. His Excellency Goldberger has served as Israeli Ambassador to South Sudan and Eritrea. In 2014, he also served as the coordinator of the International Governmental Committee for Students in Agriculture. He also served as several positions at Ministry of Foreign Affairs and at several missions such as Norway and Nigeria. He can speak English, Hebrew, Arabic, Norwegian, and Tigrinya. Excellency, over to you, and you have 20 minutes.
Thank you very much. Shalom and namaste to everybody. This is true. My Israeli name is Hanan Goder. Toramero Nepali nam dilbad urho. So I'm very, very much privileged to participate in this talk. I will do my best because I really don't want to make short the time from the other speakers. So I will do my best to summarize things in the next 20 minutes. I would like to discuss about mainly three topics now. I will start with some history of the bilateral relations, Nepal-Israel, Israel-Nepal bilateral relations. I will shift to the background on Israel. That's the second topic that I would like to mention. And the third issue is to concentrate on bilateral issues, things that are in common or things that happen bilaterally between the two countries. So with your permission, I would like to start in the year 1960. In the year 1960, and we have marked already 61 years ago, only recently, the Prime Minister, the first democratically elected Prime Minister in Nepal, Mr. B.P. Koirala, made a decision to establish diplomatic relations with the State of Israel. This was the first, and for many decades, the only country in this part of the world to have relations with the State of Israel. Israel will never forget this gesture. Israel will never forget our good friends that made these relations. And I think that since establishment, during the last 61 years, we have excellent bilateral relations between the two countries. And I think that in a while, we will talk about it. 60 years is not a lot in life of nations. Maybe it's more than a lot in life of humans. But I think that the prospects of the 60 coming years is even better of the last 60 years. With your permission, I would like to start talking a little bit about Israel. When you want to understand a country, when you want to understand a culture, when you want to understand a topic, you have to find out first the basic information about the country. You know what? Even if you take another issue, of course, you have to learn about it. Israel was established as a young country. It was established in 1948 after a period of colonialism under the British mandate. Israel is a small country. Israel is half the size of Bhutan. Israel is the size of one of the Nepali provinces. And this is very, very important to understand when you try to understand and to learn about Israel. The population in Israel is almost 10 million people, which means that Israel is approximately 1/3 of the population of Nepal. Life expectancy in Israel. Israel is regarded one of the leading countries, maybe number 5 or 6 or 7 in the world in life expectancy, which means that the average Israeli will live to the year will reach the age of 82. And by the way, women reach the average age of 84, and men make it only to 81. We all know that women are better, but these are important statistics to understand because it affects, it shows what the society in Israel. In terms of production, Israel is located somewhere in the middle or the average of the European GDP. An average Israeli will produce and consume approximately the same like the average European. Of course, there is never average in statistics, there is average. Of course, in humans, it is very, very difficult to measure it. Talking about literacy rate, how many of us can read and write? The average, the numbers in Israel is reached to 100%. 99 point something percent of Israelis can read and write. It's important to understand because it shows what is the society. When you talk about colleges, 60% or 55%, the majority of the students that go to colleges are women for the first degree and also for the second degree, which means that women are more educated in Israel. It's an important fact. High-tech is a leading part of the Israeli economy, of the Israeli occupation. More than 50% of the Israeli export is high-tech. If you all look at your mobile telephones, something inside your mobile telephone is coming from Israel, and so on and so on. So this is a major issue. And again, when you talk about economy, high-tech is a leading factor in Israel. Let's talk about agriculture. Israel is very proud of its agriculture. Israel is half desert, very harsh conditions, and even the other half is not very rainy, but still we manage to do very well with our agriculture. In Israel, only 3% of the population are farmers. 3% of the population are farmers, and still these 3% produced food to the other 97% and even exporting some of our food. All these elements, all these things are very, very important when you come and you try to look at the society. And the opposite issue is, of course, more than 95% of Israelis live in urban areas, in cities. We are a very much nation of people who live in cities, not in the villages. So all these facts are, of course, important when you talk about Israel to understand the logic, the way of thinking of the country. Let us talk about bilateral issues. As I mentioned, during the last 60 years of relations, a lot of things have been going on the bilateral aspects. We are sending every year people to Israel on our scholarship. The Israeli aid agency, its name is Mashav, the aid agency, is sending a lot of people to Israel. And so far, again, in these 60 years of relations, we have thousands of Nepalese that studied in Israel, spent time in Israel, short time courses in Israel. And when I say short time courses, people go for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months sometimes. At the same time, we are bringing Israeli experts here on education, on health issues, on agriculture, on gender, on civil society, on so many topics. Our experts are coming here to different organizations and do their knowledge sharing, which is very, very important. The Israeli program for scholarships is not for people to study in university, because we know that in many cases, these students remain in the hosting country. So we prefer to give the scholarships to these people that are in the middle of their career to upgrade the level of their knowledge. And by the way, let me tell you that for the first time during COVID, we will send a group of 25 Nepalese to Israel on education, pedagogical innovation to Israel on our scholarships for a workshop in Jerusalem at the end of December. So that was one topic of scholarships. The second topic that I would like to share the knowledge of the cooperation is on agriculture. We have started almost 10 years ago a program called Learn and Earn. The program of Learn and Earn is dedicated to upgrading the level of knowledge in the agricultural, in the rural sector. The rural sector in Nepal, how should I say, is not as progressed as it is in Israel. And in many cases, we know that it is a substance, people only exist with what they produce, but they hardly sell things outside. These students or farmers, in cooperation, we did it with a lovely organization called SKBB, Sana Kisan Bikas Bank, have gone to Israel for a 1-year Learn and Earn training. It's an on-the-job training. These students, these farmers, go to Israel, work in an Israeli farm for 5 days a week, earn salary. 1 day per week, they go to college and gain knowledge, Israeli knowledge. Of course, they have to submit a research document at the end of the year that is guided by an Israeli professor. So it's a very, very successful program. So far, we have 3,000 graduates of this program. And if you travel all over the country, you see the graduates, what they are doing, what they are producing. And actually, you can see that the Nepali agriculture has made big progress in the last few years. And big part of it is because of these students. Drip irrigation, tunnels, fertilizers, all these things are introducing now to Nepal. And it is going very, very well. And these farmers, these students have adopted the logo, the slogan: agriculture is not a hobby. Agriculture is a business, it is a profession, it's a way of life. And this is why we see this change. That was on the issue of agriculture. With your permission, I would like to remember what happened here in 2015, the terrible earthquake. I was with the Nepali delegation at the same time in Jerusalem, and I remember the shock of the people when things happened here. Israel was the first one that sent 4 cargo planes, full with 200 doctors and medical team that came here for rescue, and they established a field hospital here in Chauni. And I think they have done a remarkable work. And again, this is important. When friends need each other, Israel will always be there, the same like Nepal is always together with Israel. Tourism is a lovely sector here in Nepal. listen, you have the most amazing mountains, and nature, and Terai, and not only that, amazing culture and smiling people. And this is attracting thousands of Israelis. Actually, most of Israelis come here, but not like the normal tourists that can come for 3, 4, 1 week, 2 weeks. They stay here very long periods. They come to Nepal and assimilate for a month, sometimes 2, sometimes even 3 months. They stay here for very long times, very long periods, and they enjoy the country. And I think this is very, very important for Israelis to understand the culture, the scenery of Nepal. And I think it is going very, very well. We all hope that COVID will go down and tourism will go to its deserving place. Let me add something, another agreement that we have signed only 1 year ago, an agreement that was initiated by the Nepali ambassador in Israel, Dr. Anjan Shakya, on the issue of caregivers. And this is the first time that there will be a G2G, government-to-government agreement. We have done all the process, and more than 1,000 people, more than 1,000 caregivers will leave, again, I hope next month, to Israel, to work in Israel. This is an amazing change for 1,000 Nepali families and 1,000 Israeli families. You understand how it will affect the Nepali families and the Israeli families. These people are going for 5 years, and when they come back, they clearly have different and new life. I will conclude also with the cooperation on high-tech. Israeli high-tech, as I mentioned, is flourishing in Israel, but also in Nepal. Israeli companies have invested and started development centers, software centers here in Nepal. You have lovely youth, you have lovely young people that are doing high-tech, and we are very, very proud, Israel, to share our knowledge and to assimilate them into Israeli companies. And as you know, the world is very small, no borders. The cyber has no borders, so we can all share these things. This is really, in a nutshell, what the embassy is doing, and I think that the time is almost finished. So I will thank you all and really appreciate this lovely, lovely initiative to develop all the knowledge and all the work that is done. Thank you very much for this program.
Thank you, Excellency Hanan Goder-Goldberger, Israeli Ambassador to Nepal. Thank you for highlighting deep ties that exist between Nepal and the State of Israel. May I now invite Ms. Sepideh Keyvanshad. Sepideh Keyvanshad serves as a mission director of USAID Nepal, a career development professional. She has worked within the US government in a variety of roles, including the Department of State and the National Security Council, and as a foreign service officer with USAID since 2000. She has been posted overseas with USAID in Afghanistan and El Salvador, and has served with international and non-governmental organizations in Russia and Haiti. She has broad experience working with and across development and government institutions, and her career has focused on supporting governance efforts as well as institutional and organizational change around the world. Keyvanshad holds a MSc in Strategic Studies from the National War College and JD from the University of Illinois College of Law. She speaks Farsi and Spanish. Ms. Keyvanshad, thank you for your time, and you also have around 20 minutes. Over to you.
Namaste. Good afternoon. Good evening. Let me also start by saying thank you to you, Dr. Jaiswal, and to NIICE for inviting me to speak at this event. I believe you're the last session, so I've been checking you on Twitter. It seems like you've been having some great sessions this morning and yesterday, so I'm very happy to be able to contribute to this two-day event that you've set out. So thank you for that. I will try to speak for a lot less than 10 minutes. Let's see how that goes. And I believe this will allow us to also have some question and answers. And given that my colleague Mark Templer was also speaking earlier this afternoon about the bilateral relationship, I am going to focus my comments mostly on the development relationship between our two countries. I will first talk a little bit about the history of USAID in general, the history of USAID in Nepal, some of the focus areas, and also talk a little bit about what is next in terms of our relationship. And then I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about what makes for a successful bilateral relationship in terms of development between our two countries. And this is a perfect time for me to be invited because we are celebrating USAID's 60th anniversary. USAID was created on November 3rd, 1961, under the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. And USAID has been in Nepal as long as USAID has existed. And we have actually been in Nepal in terms of development assistance. Even before that, we have a 75-year development relationship with this country, 75 years of partnership overall, and 60 years with USAID. Starting with some of the work that USAID has done in Nepal, I'd like to start by talking about what our bilateral engagement, bilateral relationship, and our joint efforts had led to, some examples in the past 60 years. One of the things that I hear mostly talked about ever since I arrived in Nepal myself about a little bit over a year ago is the efforts that USAID supported in terms of eradicating malaria in the Terai region. Other areas where we, in partnership with Nepal, have been able to achieve have been improving child and maternal health, reductions in child and maternal mortality, focusing on agriculture technology and increasing agricultural yields. And really a lot of the work we've done has been in the areas of education and health broadly, improving its quality and its reach across Nepal. My ambassador Goder talked about the earthquake of 2015. USAID has also, as soon as the earthquake happened, we were able to begin supporting the country in terms of post-earthquake reconstruction. We're actually at the point that we're finishing up the post-earthquake reconstruction, and in the past several years, our efforts have led to the construction of 45,000 earthquake-safe houses, building resilient shelter for over 220,000 people. We are now finishing up the rebuilding of public health facilities and schools and getting kids back to school. And one of the most recent examples of the effort of USAID in Nepal has been in the energy sector, where in the past couple of years, we're able to leverage over $1 billion of private sector funds for clean energy, specifically in hydropower, working with private sector, Nepal's energy regulatory bodies. We were able to create the infrastructure and policies for Nepal to take advantage of its vast hydropower potential while using those resources in an environmental manner. These are the areas we have been working in. These are some of the accomplishments that we have jointly made in the past several years, in the past 6 decades actually together. And these are the areas that we are going to continue to work on. I was asked to also talk about what is next. What is USAID focused on now? We have recently finalized a 5-year strategy, a development strategy that will provide a little bit over $650 million grant to Nepal in the next 5 years. The areas we're going to be focused on are continuing to be the areas that we have already focused on, but our priorities in the next several years, first and foremost, it's continued COVID response. That includes making sure the systems and commodities, including vaccines, are in place to bring COVID-19 to an end, and also to address the second and third order impacts on not just health, but also education, livelihoods, and the overall economy. Another area of our focus is going to be continuing to support Nepal as it is graduating from least developed country and becoming a middle income country. We are also going to continue to work with Nepal to meet its climate change commitments as it strives to reach net zero emissions that it has now committed itself for 2045, and as it moves to clean energy and as it focuses on adaptation and resilience. We will also put a lot of our efforts on supporting the different levels of government to strengthen federalism, to bring governments closer to its people, and to engage more Nepalese, including civil society, in the governance conversation. And ultimately, a lot of the work that we do within all these areas is to increase the space and to improve the platforms and to bring more voices and ideas into that space to further develop Nepal. And ultimately, the goal of our development assistance is really to strengthen the bilateral relationship between the US and Nepal, our government and our people. One of the things, and this is the final thing I will talk about, is as we talk about the bilateral relationship between the countries, what is it that makes for a successful development relationship between our two countries? And first and foremost, I think that means USAID is in a support role. The US government is in a support role, and that Nepal takes the leadership in its own development. That means its government, its people, and its institutions. It also means it's the government and its people that come together around the consensus of the objectives that they've laid out to each other, whether it's response to COVID, whether it's response to climate change, whether it's response to its economy, it's how do you move down that middle income path. And it also depends on engaging and supporting local organizations and the civil society and having them all work together. And finally, it includes a focus on inclusion, bringing all voices around the table. And for us, that's really important because for us to do our development, the bilateral relationship isn't just with the government, it's also with the people. It's with civil society, it's with think tanks that I'm speaking at right now, and it's really the communities that we work with. You know, one of the questions I have been asked in the past is what makes for a sustainable development? What makes the work that we do here sustainable? And it's not really what USAID does or what the US government does that makes the work sustainable. It's what the Nepali government does, and it's what its institutions do. One of the areas that many of us donors have been talking about recently is civil service reform. You know, what is the role of the civil service actors? What is the relationship between the different levels of government, and how do the civil service actors fall into that? So for us, sustainability is going to be dependent not just on what we do, not on the amount of funding that we bring into the country, but in kind of the relationships that we can continue to have with the Nepali government, with its people, but also the relationship that the Nepal civil society internally has with each other and with the government. So I think I will stop there. In case there are any questions, I'm happy to answer that. But I do want to say thank you again for inviting me to this session. It's great to hear also my colleagues talk about their bilateral relationship with Nepal. And I've been here for a year now. I'm still getting to discover the country. I'm just getting around to see this amazing, beautiful country and getting to see just the diversity of it, and to see how the different parts of it are different from each other. And so thank you so much. And again, look forward to any questions you may have.
Ms. Keyvanshad, thank you so much for your insightful remarks. Since we have a few more minutes, I'd like to take this opportunity to share some of the questions. Like, how does USAID support research and education in Nepal? Like, what kind of support and engagement can think tank or research institute like NIICE can receive from USAID?
I would respond to that question by turning it around a little bit. It's not necessarily the kind of support that research institutes and think tanks can receive from USAID. It's how can we engage each other? How do we work together? I think think tanks are also part of society, civil society. Think tanks and and research institutes are entities that can inform the work USAID does, that can help us figure out what needs to be done where and how. And so it's partly inviting us to these type of events. It's having us tell you what we're doing, but also allowing us to hear from you. What are you doing? How do you see the different layers of the situation in Nepal so that we can work better together? I will give one example of how we are supporting. In the agriculture sector, we will be supporting, I think it's called the Agriculture University, the University of Agriculture and Forestry. We are starting a relationship with them to help them improve their curriculum, to help them make their education more practical and more modernized, and also to develop links between universities here in Nepal and in the United States. So that is one example. But as I said earlier, ultimately, it's really how we engage each other. How do we work together and how do we support each other towards the improved development of Nepal?
Let me move to the next question. What are the current top priorities of USAID in Nepal at the moment? How does USAID plan to continue its support for Nepal to recover from the brunt of COVID-19?
I think the last time I spoke with you, this was before the new variant of COVID had shown up on the scene. And at that point, my response was, well, hopefully COVID is going away and we can focus on the post-COVID recovery very soon. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. And USAID, our goal are to continue to support Nepal, hopefully soon post-recovery, but if there's another wave that comes at us, to continue to support. We've been doing that through commodities, through technical assistance. We are bringing more and more vaccines. The latest one was the 100,000 doses of Pfizer. And so we will continue to support Nepal in its COVID, in addressing COVID. And we already have started working on post-COVID recovery in education, in livelihoods, in agriculture. And unfortunately, COVID seems to want to stay with us for a while, so we'll continue to provide that support, whether it's through additional funding, technical assistance, vaccine, administration of vaccines throughout the country.
Ms. Keyvanshad, let me move to the other question. How had USAID as an agency for development been working towards sustainability of the beneficiaries and ensuring that the recipient countries become self-reliant and self-resilient?
I think I started to talk about that a little bit at the end of my remarks. Sustainability depends as much on Nepal itself, its government, its civil society, its institutions, think tanks like yours, its communities, as it does on the US, USAID, and our government. You know, one of the things I did start talking about is, for example, civil service reform. I think to be sustainable as from a perspective of a government, you need a government that's stable. You need people within that government who have the institutional memory and can continue to have the relationships with us. Within the communities, it means engaging those communities. You know, we're talking a lot about the concept of inclusion, but ultimately, sustainability is about inclusion. It's about bringing everyone into the conversation. It's about bringing everyone into identifying the problems and coming up with the solutions. And it's connecting the different layers of government with the communities and with the civil society and with the others who can create this consensus around where you want the country to go, and then make all the efforts and the improvements and the development more sustainable. Because I think, unfortunately, without that, you will have some successes, you will have some improvements, but they will not be long-lived, and they will lead to some level of instability if that's not the case.
Ms. Keyvanshad, before we wrap up, let me ask one final question. Let me ask you to share your experience here in Nepal. As you have spent some time in South Asia, how has your stay in Nepal been?
I think from a personal perspective, despite COVID, it's been wonderful. Nepal is an incredibly diverse, incredibly beautiful country with such a rich culture, with such a diversity of just celebrations and people. So from a personal perspective, as I'm getting around the country more and more, it's been an incredible experience. I think from a perspective, from a professional experience, it's been a bit challenging because unfortunately I arrived at a time when COVID had already hit Nepal. And so understanding how COVID is impacting Nepal, how it's impacting its different parts of the population differently, how do we continue the relationship between our two countries to bring COVID to an end? Now there's the issue of climate change that, fortunately has become even more, has been brought more to the forefront. Nepal made certain commitments in terms of what level of net zero it wants to reach. And so it's been challenging, but I have to say it's also been incredibly fulfilling because Nepal, as we've seen when I first began, the accomplishments that we have jointly been able to contribute to in the past 60 years, I think it's a place where there are challenges, but there are definitely areas where we can work jointly on together. So, so far, it's been amazing to be here, and I'm looking forward to another amazing few years during my tenure. Thank you.
Ms. Sepideh, Keyvanshad, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you and having you with us. We wish to have you again in future, maybe in real. Now we'd like to move to the next, Mr. Edward Roberts, Deputy Ambassador of British Embassy. Edward Roberts is serving as a DCM at the British Embassy Kathmandu since August 2019. He has been working in the civil service for nearly 15 years now. Prior to being appointed as a DCM, Edward was the policy manager for security partnership and the senior policy advisor on migration and EU asylum cooperation at the Cabinet Office, Department for Exiting the European Union, London. His other role include Consul and Second Secretary, Prosperity and Political at Foreign and Commonwealth Office, British Embassy, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo, EU Institutions and Treaty Change Bill, Team Desk Officer at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, London, and Seconded National Expert, Human Development and Migration, DG AIDCO, European Commission, Brussels. Mr. Roberts, over to you, and you also have 20 minutes.
Hi there, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, namaskar. As you've said, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Dr. Jaiswal, and thank you, NIICE, for the invitation to come and speak today. It's a real pleasure to be at this event, organised on the subject of understanding Nepal's foreign policy. This is obviously a very broad subject, so I'm going to be focusing today on the UK's engagement with Nepal over the last five or 6 years. And I'm aware that I'm the last speaker on this quite big programme, so I will try and keep to time. I'll start talking a bit about our strategic priorities, and then I'll focus on a couple of specific areas of cooperation between the UK and Nepal, some of which we've already been talking about earlier on in this session. So I arrived in Nepal in August 2019, and the context for my role has obviously changed completely since I arrived in this beautiful country. Nepal has a new prime minister and a new cabinet. Well, obviously, the world has been reeling from COVID and other shocks. And what was my department, the FCO, has merged with DFID to form a new single ministry. So I now work in the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, or FCDO. So I have a new Secretary of State, Liz Truss, and she set out 4 overarching priorities, foreign policy priorities for the whole department, the whole of the UK. And those involve deepening our economic partnerships, building stronger security ties, using our influence to tackle the key challenges of our age, such as climate change, supporting girls and women, and responding to humanitarian emergencies. And then finally, a very sort of classic foreign policy priority of supporting British nationals abroad, including that consular support that we provide as an embassy. Now, our job as an embassy is to translate those overarching priorities into a local plan for action here in Nepal, and that's what we've done. So we've got a British Embassy country plan, and it sets that out. The UK cooperation with Nepal is broad and it's deep. So the bilateral relationship is the oldest bilateral relationship that Nepal has. It's over 200 years old, so there's a lot of history there. But equally, it's a dynamic relationship, and the priorities have changed over time according to the global context. So in our current country plan, the ultimate goal is described as deepening our strategic relationship with Nepal, delivering our shared security and prosperity interests, and a more democratic, inclusive, prosperous, and resilient Nepal. And then under that, there are 5 campaign goals. I won't go into too much detail, but they cover open societies, stability and security, trade and prosperity, climate and resilience, and girls' education. So you can see that the local priorities do, to some extent, map onto the departmental strategic priorities that I talked about. And then 2 of these areas I want to talk about in a bit more detail today. So they've been a particular focus for us over the last 18 months. They've definitely dominated the work of the embassy in my time here, particularly, as I say, the last 18 months of it. And they are COVID-19 and climate change, which are perhaps the greatest challenges of our time, and certainly priorities, I think, for many of our ministries at the moment. So firstly, in terms of COVID-19, like many countries, the COVID pandemic here has been a long crisis in Nepal. The first case here was January 2020, so shortly after I arrived. And the UK government work on COVID-19 responded quickly in those first few months. So we had to quite quickly shift the focus of lots of our work as an embassy. So there was a huge amount of work on humanitarian crisis preparedness and response, supporting new vulnerable groups through our programming and aid programs. And then there was the consular response, so the evacuation of British nationals with the repatriation flights that many embassies, as the airport was closed, as Kathmandu airport was closed, embassies were putting on those repatriation flights for British nationals and other country nationals. The British Embassy here repurposed over 40 million of its budget to support the COVID response in 2020-2021, so that financial year. So quite quickly moved a lot of its funding over to COVID-19. And the response reached nearly a million people directly. We ensured at least 50% of those were women, with interventions such as WASH and job support and direct cash transfers. And then also the other side of that is obviously the support on vaccines. So the UK is a major contributor to COVAX, which has allocated 2 million vaccines to Nepal. And in addition to that, the UK has made a bilateral donation of AstraZeneca vaccines directly to Nepal. Obviously, lots of embassy staff, like people across the country, have been personally affected by COVID-19, which has, really been affected my time here and made things quite difficult, as friends or colleagues have had family members become sick. But it is very good to see now that cases are so low here. Schools are back open, which we have been campaigning for lobbying for quite a while now, because of the impact it was having on young people's education. And some sort of normality has returned. But as we've already mentioned, everyone I know will be watching the really worrying case of the new variant. This new variant first detected in South Africa very carefully. Okay, so on COVID-19, hopefully, the numbers here are good, and to some extent, we'll be looking at the next stage of our response. On climate change, this is definitely a long-term objective, and that was the second area I really wanted to talk about just after the COP Climate Change Summit in the UK. So the COVID-19 crisis has demonstrated how global innovation and collaboration are absolutely essential. And have been essential to overcome this common challenge, or to respond to it. And now we need to apply the same approach to saving the planet, even if we have very different responsibilities. So the science is clear. I won't talk in too much detail, but we need to take immediate and drastic action to avoid us stepping over the 1.5-degree temperature limit that we've globally agreed. And even this limit will have serious implications for the mountains, where temperatures are rising faster than in other regions, and lives have already long been more vulnerable. So Nepal is particularly important in this. We've been working really closely with the government here, and the delegation that recently travelled to the COP climate change conference in Glasgow. So at COP, Nepal made some really ambitious commitments, which was great to see. They announced their intention to achieve net zero emissions over the period 2020 to 2045, and to become carbon negative after 2025. So that was brilliant to see. And this represents a really significant increase in ambition from its previous commitment. Nepal also announced that it'll increase its forest cover, which it has already been doing, up to 45% by 2030, and to ensure that all vulnerable people are protected from climate change by 2030. So really amazing, ambitious targets there. But Nepal has stated it needs significant financing, up to 250 billion for mitigation and adaptation up until 2050, which is a huge amount of money. So to help deliver on climate change, at the British Embassy, we've committed over 500 million through bilateral and multilateral channels over the last 5 years. We're currently working with local governments and the Ministry of Forest and Environment to deliver our 70 million flagship climate smart development programme. And we're also promoting renewable energy through the Sustainable Energy Challenge Fund, so leveraging public and private sector funding for that. But we know, obviously, our support alone will not nearly be enough. So we're working with other development partners to deliver support for the GRID framework. So working closely with the American Embassy, for example, on the GRID, the Green, Resilience and Inclusive Development framework to mainstream climate support. So GRID has already identified an additional 4.2 billion of development partner support for climate-related activities. And Nepal is a real priority partner for the UK on climate change. The UK is also committed to doing our own share, obviously at home, and we've doubled our climate finance up to 16 billion up until 2025. And we domestically aim to become one of the largest offshore wind energy producers. We're planting trees, 330,000 hectares a year, and creating new jobs in the climate and low carbon sector. And then here, actually locally, British Embassy is working with the British Council to plant trees also. So 20,000 trees we're planting as part of Nepal government's 15 million tree plantation campaign. And we're supporting youth on climate-friendly innovation and action on gender equality and social inclusion in our climate work. So climate change has been an absolute priority for our embassy since I've been here, and I definitely don't see that changing. Responding to COVID, so just to conclude, responding to COVID and climate change will be, marathons rather than sprints. Both of these are huge tasks. They'll take long-term strategic action. They'll require collaboration across governments and the involvement of private and third sector. So I'm really proud to say that the UK stands beside Nepal as one of its oldest friends and partners on these. Our cooperation with the government is very strong. We have, very close relationship, and our broader ties also outside, from culture to education to scholarships, our defence relationship, obviously, the British Gurkhas and the recruitment into that, and people to people and cultural links. So I really look forward to continuing to work together on the priorities I've outlined, but also all of the campaign goals and mutual priorities we have with the government of Nepal. I'll leave it there because I know that we are going to time and it's nearly 7 o'clock, but any questions I would welcome, and thank you all for your time.
Mr. Edward Roberts, thank you for your insightful remarks. We're really privileged to have you with us today, and we thank you for your time. We'd also like to move to the next speaker, His Excellency Bhrigu Dhungana, Nepalese Ambassador to Canada. His Excellency Bhrigu Dhungana is currently serving as the Ambassador of Nepal to Canada. Prior to his appointment as the Ambassador, he was the Joint Secretary at the South Asia Division and Europe America Division, and the Minister Counselor, Deputy Permanent Representative, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Permanent Mission, Embassy of Nepal in Geneva. He was also the part of the 7th International Migration Law course in San Remo, Italy, and the UNITAR IPI Fellow Program in Norway. Excellency, over to you, and you also have 20 minutes.
Thank you very much. Namaste. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and the entire team of NIICE for inviting me to participate in this international conference on understanding Nepal's foreign policy. Today, I would like to briefly discuss various aspects of Nepal-Canada relationship. I would primarily focus on its inception, progression, main features, and the future prospects. I'm pleased to mention here that Nepal and Canada have been enjoying excellent relations, marked by goodwill, friendship, and cooperation ever since the establishment of diplomatic relations in January 1965. One important aspect of our relations is that both countries embrace similar values of democracy, good governance, rule of law, and respect for freedom and human rights within federal frameworks. It is flourishing at different levels. Besides relations at the official level, those at the institutional and the people-to-people levels have deepened considerably over the decades. Canada has been a reliable development partner of Nepal. Canadian cooperation mainly contributed to strengthening the aviation sector and such other areas as energy, rural development, health, education, geographical survey, agriculture, poverty alleviation, and food security. It's a cooperation for Nepal's socio-economic development endeavors for decades is highly appreciated. Canada's support to Nepal's development needs has only grown in recent years with the increase in funding to Nepal via multilateral and partnership channels. Nepal is among the top 25 country recipients of partnerships for development innovation funding by Canada. Importantly, the depth of friendship between the two countries is amply reflected also by Canadian support to Nepal in difficult times, such as post-natural disasters and calamities. Nepali people remain thankful to the people and government of Canada for their spontaneous assistance in the aftermath of the devastating earthquake of April 2015, as well as for Nepal's post-earthquake reconstruction efforts. Canada also supported Nepal by providing much needed vaccines and medical equipment to fight against COVID-19 pandemic, while donating 368,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine through COVAX facility. Canada provided Nepal with a large number of ventilators and related equipment, oxygen concentrators, and personal protective equipment between June and November this year. The strong relations between the two countries have been further enriched by recent high-level visits or meetings and exchange of views on pertinent matters. Such increasing engagement between the two sides has also given new dynamism to our quest for advancing mutual benefit. For instance, the Prime Minister of Nepal and the Prime Minister of Canada met on 24 September 2018 and held discussions on important issues of mutual interest. A memorandum of understanding on the establishment of a bilateral consultation mechanism between the foreign ministries of the two countries was also signed by them. Subsequently, the first meeting of the mechanism was held in October 2018 in Ottawa. The second meeting was held virtually in December 2020. In both meetings, the Nepali delegation was led by the Foreign Secretary. As a matter of fact, The establishment of the bilateral consultation mechanism has institutionalized a regular dialogue on matters of mutual interest between the two countries. Speaker of the Senate of Canada paid an official visit to Nepal in February 2020, leading a delegation of the Canadian senators. Similarly, the foreign ministers of two countries spoke with each other to exchange the view on the initiatives taken by their respective governments for controlling the COVID-19 pandemic. They also reiterated their commitments to stand by each other in these difficult times, including through support to each other's nationals. Likewise, the Minister for Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation of Nepal visited Canada in connection with the 40th Assembly of the International Civil Aviation Organization in 2019. Importantly, in an effort to establish and strengthen relations between the parliaments of the two countries, Canada-Nepal Parliamentary Friendship Group was formed in Canada in October 2016. A similar Nepal-Canada Parliamentary Friendship Group has been established in Nepal's parliament in April 2019. I'm pleased to recall here that both sides wish to take bilateral relations to a new height, including through further expansion and consolidation of mutually beneficial cooperation. In this respect, exchange of high-level visits, engagements at different levels, and the implementation of the understandings reached between the two sides would continue to receive priority attention. In addition to bilateral matters, Nepal and Canada hold similar views on issues such as climate change, peacekeeping, human rights, multilateralism, and promoting the developing countries' agendas. Both countries have also been working closely in international forums on such issues. As I talk about Nepal-Canada relations, it would be relevant to mention briefly about Nepal's current priorities. Following the conclusion of the political transition, government of Nepal's efforts are now focused on bringing about positive change and prosperity in the lives of the Nepali people by building a foundation for socio-economic transformation and emphasizing high and equitable economic development. Despite the economic setback of the COVID-19 pandemic, Nepal has been making preparations for sustainable graduation from LDC status. The next milestone of Nepal is to become a middle-income country by 2030. Such a mission would undoubtedly require huge resources. Therefore, focus has been laid on, among other things, increasing Nepal's trade, diversifying connectivity, attracting more foreign investment in national priority sectors, promoting tourism, and obtaining high-end technology, including through economic diplomacy. When we talk about economic diplomacy, our coordination with and support from friendly countries like Canada always remain crucial. Since economic diplomacy is a major tool of Nepal's foreign policy, efforts are being made for its effective implementation. Our embassy has been implementing economic diplomacy with priority. In this context, our focus lies on creating suitable atmosphere for increasing Nepal's trade with Canada, attracting more investment in Nepal's priority sectors, acquiring advanced technology, and promoting Nepal's tourism in Canada. With regard to trade, Canada is the 11th largest country for Nepal's export and the 6th largest in terms of import. For instance, in 2020, Nepal exported goods worth 755 million rupees to Canada. And in the same year, its import from Canada stood at 18 billion rupees. Nonetheless, there is a tremendous potential of further trade expansion between our two countries. The duty-free market access available for the Nepali products in Canada can be utilized by our exporters. The business organizations and entrepreneurs from both countries have also taken important steps to foster bilateral trade. For instance, in May 2013, the Federation of Nepalese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FNCCI, and the Indo-Canadian Business Chamber signed a memorandum of understanding to establish the Canada-Nepal Business Executive Committee. With the initiatives of dynamic entrepreneurs, some organizations have also been formed in Canada in order to promote bilateral trade and investment, such as Canada-Nepal Business Council and Federation of Canada-Nepal Chamber of Commerce. We strongly believe that bilateral trade can be further enhanced through the establishment of links between relevant entities and the private sectors of the two countries, formation of coordinate mechanisms between chambers of commerce, exchange of visits of officials and trade delegations, and participation in trade fairs. Hence, all of these have been our priority. Another area of focus is foreign investment. Nepal has been inviting foreign investment in such priority sectors as physical infrastructure, hydropower, tourism, and industry. In order to facilitate investment, various concrete measures have been taken, such as policy reform, setting up of suitable mechanisms, and organization of promotional activities. Nepal has been pursuing liberal economic and foreign investment policy. In order to improve investment climate, it has enacted important legislations, statutory provisions pertaining to land acquisition, company registration, environmental assessment, and infrastructure development have been relaxed and simplified. At the same time, Nepal has huge demographic dividend, with about 57% of the population at the working age group. Nepal's strategic location between the world's two largest markets, China and India, serves as a compelling incentive for investment. With India, it has duty-free arrangements for its products, while China has granted a significant number of Nepalese tariff lines duty-free access to its market. In addition to this, export from Nepal is entitled to various kinds of duty-free and preferential schemes put in operation by both the developed and developing countries. Nepal has also been making significant progress in connectivity diversification. We hosted two investment summits in 2017 and March 2019, respectively, with the encouraging response from a large number of foreign investors. Investors from Canada also participated in the Nepal Investment Summit in 2019. When it comes to investing, Canadian investors have many choices in Nepal. Besides other sectors, hydropower remains a prime choice, as Canada has very good expertise and technology in hydropower generation and distribution. As of July, 3.3 billion rupees worth of FDI has been received in Nepal from Canada, which is invested in 47 different companies, and they have generated a large number of jobs. We continue to engage in promotional activities for attracting more FDI. There is no doubt that Nepal is one of the most attractive tourist destinations in the world. Tourism is an important pillar of our economy, with a significant contribution to the GDP. It has created many jobs. Nepal wishes to invite more and more foreign tourists annually and increase the contribution of this sector to the national economy. And for this, efforts need to be directed towards enhancing investment in the tourism infrastructure and organizing promotional campaigns. So as to promote Nepal as an attractive tourist destination and to facilitate the visits of more and more Canadian tourists, we have been organizing various promotional events in different parts of Canada with the support of and of course in collaboration with tourism entrepreneurs, non-resident Nepali Association, NRNA, Nepali community organizations, Nepali diaspora members, and other stakeholders. It is a matter of satisfaction that the number of Canadian tourists visiting Nepal has been increasing in recent years. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, only a small number of tourists from Canada could visit Nepal in 2020. We have been making efforts to regain the momentum with improvement in the pandemic situation and the reopening of various sectors. As I also indicated earlier, the friendship between Nepal and Canada has been further consolidated by growing people-to-people relations. The presence of a large number of non-resident Nepalese in Canada remains a strong bridge between the two countries. The Nepali diaspora has been actively involved in various creative activities for the benefit of the local community. While contributing substantially to the Canadian economy, the Nepali Canadians have been enriching the multicultural heritage of Canada through Nepali language, art, music, literature, and culture. The non-resident Nepali Association, NRNA, and other organizations and individuals have also played an important role in contributing to Nepal's development efforts, as well as in expanding educational, academic, and research activities between Nepal and Canada. We have been urging them to further contribute to the economic prosperity of Nepal through their knowledge, skills, technology, and capital, as per the policy of the government of Nepal. Organizations like Nepal-Canada Friendship and Cultural Association in Nepal and the Canada-Nepal Friendship and Cultural Society in Canada have been playing important roles in further consolidating relationship between the two countries. While talking about enhanced engagement, education is another important area of relationship between the two countries, as many Nepali students come to Canada each year for higher education, and at the same time, culture and sports offer unique opportunities to strengthen bilateral ties. Similarly, our focus also lies on establishing linkages among the academic and research institutions of the two countries so as to institutionalize cooperation in relevant fields. To conclude, I would like to say that the excellent relations existing between Nepal and Canada have been further strengthening with enhanced cooperation and engagement between the two countries at different levels. Both countries work bilaterally as well as in multilateral forums on areas of common interest. I also believe that through effective implementation of various components of economic diplomacy, both our sides would immensely benefit. The relationship between the two countries will be further expanded and deepened in the coming days with joint efforts from the two sides. Thank you very much.
His Excellency Bhrigu Dhungana, thank you so much for your interesting remarks. Thank you so much for your time and support to NIICE. Excellencies, distinguished participants, friends from diplomatic community, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen, here we come to the end of the session, and we also come to the end of the two-day conference on understanding Nepal's foreign policy. His Excellency Hanan Goder-Goldberger, Ambassador of Israel to Nepal, Sepideh Keyvanshad, Mission Director, U.S. Agency for International Development Nepal, Edward Roberts, Deputy Ambassador of British Embassy, His Excellency Bhrigu Dhungana, Nepalese Ambassador to Canada, His Excellency Krishna Prasad Dhakal, Nepalese Ambassador to UAE, Mr. Mark Templer, Deputy Chief of Political Economic Section, U.S. Embassy Kathmandu, Ambassador Dr. Narad Nath Bhardwaj, former Nepalese Ambassador to Qatar, His Excellency Durga Prasad Bhandari, Nepalese Ambassador to State of Kuwait. It was a privilege and honor to have you all with us today. The two-day conference based on the theme Nepal's foreign policy was inaugurated by Professor Dr. Meena Vaidya-Malla, Professor Dr. Sambhuram Simkhada, Professor Dr. Kharga Kesi, Professor Dr. Madan Bhattrai, and Deepak Raj Joshi. We are extremely humbled and encouraged by their presence. We'd also like to express our profound gratitude and sincere thanks to our chair and the eminent speakers who joined us throughout the event. We are really honored to have you all as a speaker with us in the last 2 days. I'd also like to extend our gratitude to our event committee. I would like to thank Paki, NIICE, Sila for their support. We are equally grateful for energy, enthusiasm, and exponential support by the roles by Akhilesh, Rakesh, Mehak from the social media and reporting team. But a special thanks should also goes to Sunima and Sunena, who was the major force behind the whole architect of this conference. Finally, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our Zoom audience and those who are watching us live on our Facebook. Thank you for your valuable time and attention. We hope to keep supporting us in future as well. We are truly honored to have you all with us throughout the event and hope to stay connected with you all in the future as well. It was really been a pleasure. Good night and stay safe.